everybody, and welcome to the Magical Learning Podcast. If you want to learn about important things in business and life and have fun with it, you're in the right place. Today is our Author Corner special, where our author in residence and director of learning, Danette Menzies, also adaptability expert, talks to another author about their books and breaks down some of the ideas. They also sort of break down what it's like to write a book and what have you. And today, Danette is talking to Michelle Gibbings. This is a fantastic conversation, and if the idea of influence being a skill that you want to cultivate is something that interests you, this is an amazing conversation. It features an amazing quote, which is that Michelle says she loves nothing better than being underestimated, and I love that phrase, so look out for that. But otherwise, enjoy this amazing author corner between Danette and Michelle Gibbings.
Hello and welcome to the Magical Learning Podcast. As you can see today, we have a guest with us, but we're going to start by finding out how our guest's week is or has been. So Michelle Gibbings, welcome to the Magical Learning Podcast. I'd love for you to tell us first, how was your week? Then we'll do the intro.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's been, I should say, a magical week. It's been awesome. It's been a really good week. I've had 2 days with an executive team and then their senior leadership group, and that is me in my happy place.
Nice.
And it's really nice when you get to the end of a session and you know that you've had a positive impact. Kind of extra special when someone gets up at the end and says, "Oh my God, I love you." And not that you do it for that reason, but it does feel really good. Like the ego, I did say, well, my status and my ego has just been elevated. So thank you very much for that. But it's nice when you know that you've done good work and it's had a good impact.
I love that. So, Michelle, I'd love for you to introduce yourself to both our audience and our viewers, because we have listeners and viewers of our podcast.
So my background is predominantly corporate. I had 25 plus years in corporate in a variety of roles. Often people look at my background and go, how did you do that? You made really big functional jumps.
Nice.
So I originally started in politics. I then went to the mining sector, then financial services. And throughout that time, I was everything from a company spokesperson to running large-scale change programs to being the head of compliance to being an advisor to the CEO, a chief of staff. So lots of different things. But at the core is I absolutely love learning. And so I could throw myself into environments where I didn't know a lot, but I had curiosity and a huge appetite to learn. I was always willing to take a risk with my career. I used to have this expression, and it's a little bit revolting, but I used to have this expression when I was accepting a role, if it didn't make me want to vomit from a little bit of fear, I knew I wasn't pushing myself hard enough.
I love that.
And then I got to my last big corporate role, which was really not a very nice environment for a raft of reasons. And it was not that the people weren't nice. There were just some things that were not working for me.
Yes.
And I went on a meditation retreat and it changed my life. And I still remember coming home to my husband and saying, I'm done. And he was like, whoa, like done with what? And I'm like, no, not you. I'm done with corporate. And he goes, oh, okay. What are you going to do?
Nice.
I said, I'm going to open a business. And he goes, in what? I said, I've got no idea. And that was 10 years ago. So almost to this day, I have hit my 10 years in business.
Congrats.
Yeah. And
let's celebrate that one.
I
did the party dance.
Yay!
That's awesome.
And, in that 10 years, I've discovered so much about myself. Some of it new, some of it a confirmation for what I already knew.
Nice.
And I love what I do. And look, it's hard work. I always say to people who start your own business, it can look glamorous, but it's hard, and you would know this.
Definitely.
But it's also incredibly rewarding, and I keep learning. I keep doing new things. I keep meeting amazing people like you, and that's one of the things that I love doing is you meet these people and you go, oh, wow, how cool is that? Look what they're doing. That's really amazing. There's another evolution that's coming as well, because I think that's the thing when you're in business, you keep evolving and growing. So I submitted my PhD in May, and
congrats.
Well, I haven't quite finished yet. So the next 6 months, I said to someone earlier, in the next couple of weeks, you'll either hear someone screaming in excitement or someone sobbing in tears, depending on what the feedback from the examiners is. But that's a continuation of me and my love of learning.
Love
And
it.
I know where I want to go with that. So I actually head off next week to the Academy of Management in Chicago to present, which is
Congrats. Oh, I love
exciting
that.
and terrifying.
Yep.
And, you know, it's the biggest conference I've ever been at. 10,000 people, 2,300 sessions. Like just
Wow.
even navigating what you go to is a
Yeah.
whole new world. But being in business, working for myself, doing what I do, which is very focused on how do you help people navigate complex environments
Nice.
so they can get good outcomes. And I
Yep.
do that in a raft of ways, but really at the core is that piece around influence. How do you help people understand that influence is a skill? It
Yes.
is not just innate. It is something that you can cultivate. And often people look at me and go, "Oh, but this clearly was easy for you. You're confident." And I'm like, "Hey, baby, buddy, no. This is all learned. You
Yes.
know, look at me early in my career and I had big fat zero confidence." So that's my potted history.
Oh, I love your history. Oh, we're going to go down a great discussion today. So I have a background, Michelle, just so you know, I work with a lot of financial people because I have an accounting background, but I'm a people person. And accountants are always wanting to know, how do we influence better? And I'm like, it's a skill, you learn it. Oh, I'm loving all the stuff that you've just shared with me. And I really love the fact that when you took a role before you started your own businesses, that there was that little bit of vomit, because that does, like, when we get there, we're at the edge of our comfort zone, but knowing that when we move into that new one, we continue to grow. And so just listening to your career, your life path is amazing. So I'll start with some questions that we started with, but I'm going to add a number of them. So, one of the topics that you put forward was around talking about building within your organisation, your team's entrepreneurial culture, and I'd love to hear more about what that culture looks like, and what are some key things that, if people are running businesses or they're working in organisations, that they could help to actually do this with their teams.
Yeah, lovely. And look, and it's interesting because at the core is this is that sort of sense of creativity and idea generation. And often people think you're either creative or you're not. And when they think of creativity, they think of, art and drama and music, as opposed to thinking of creativity and innovation as that sense of part of this is idea generation, but it comes on a scale. And so there's simple innovation, simple creativity, which is more about just making things better. Then there's that more radical creativity, radical innovation, which is very much following in the line of Clayton Christensen's work about that sense of it's disrupting, it's doing something that's totally different, that's never even been thought of before.
Yep.
And so when you think about your team and the environment that we're moving into, we need people in teams who can think differently, who can challenge the status quo, who are willing to look at problems from different angles, but also willing to go, "Hey, we haven't done this before. Let's figure this out." Or actually, we need to go into a new market, or we need to service our clients differently. And maybe that means we need different products, or maybe we need to be different processes or different service offerings that we're going to be giving them and different products that go with that. And so when you're thinking about that sense of internal creativity, you're giving your team the responsibility, but also the encouragement to be innovative, to think differently. And that doesn't mean you just leave them to their own devices, because there does need to be some sort of boundaries that sit around this. You don't want people to get, as you would know, creative with accounting. You don't want people to get creative with processes that work. So it's about going, okay, as a team, where are the ideas or things that we know that we need to do better? Let's get some boundaries around what that actually looks like. And that might start with, hey, what frustrates you at work? Where are some of the pain points in our everyday processes? What might be some things that we can actually do better? Let's look external. What are our competitors doing that perhaps we're not doing that we need to be doing? So when you start to set some of those boundaries, you get some operating parameters. And then core to this is creating the safety that your team know it's safe to experiment. It's safe to share ideas. It's safe to challenge the status quo, safe to challenge your ideas as the leader. Because if you're not creating that safety, they're going to go, well, actually, why am I going to do something different? Because if it doesn't work out, I'm going to get punished for that. And then also creating some time and space.
Nice.
Time and space so that they can think about this. Time and space so that they can experiment with new processes and new ideas. Because what I see, and I'm sure you see the same thing, is that teams, it's like they are on this treadmill and they are just running so fast.
Yes.
No headspace, no time to think. It's just do. And then, oh my God, I've got 500 emails. My email, like that, you're the email slave. I'm just responding to my emails. As opposed to going, let's carve out time. Let's get really deliberate about how we're spending our working day.
Yeah, I'm now going to swing back to, your purpose and your passion behind what you do, because we're very aligned in your message here. I'm curious about your PhD topic. So does that link to that? Are you willing to share a little bit about that? Because I'd really love to hear a bit more.
Oh, thank you for getting all nerdy with me.
I'm a total learning nerd.
So there's a number of elements to it. I'm looking at the relationship between a specific type of leadership, which is called servant leadership. And servant leadership is all about how do you serve the needs of the people who work for you? And so apart from, you're not thinking, oh, I'm the leader, I'm the little demigod, it's all about me. You're really going, actually, I'm here to help my team members succeed. I'm here to help them get to where they need to get to. So what is it that requires then for me? And so the key part is to really understand that particular type of leadership. How does it then impact the ethical nature of the employee's decision making?
That's fascinating.
As it interacts with gratitude. So the thinking behind this is we know that gratitude and the feelings of gratitude can shape how people think, how they process information, and it can actually lead people to make more ethical decisions. And so what I was interested in exploring was, if I've had an interaction with my leader and it's a positive interaction and I therefore feel more grateful, if I'm then faced with a relatively binary choice to be more or less selfish, more or less ethical, am I going to be more ethical, less selfish? Some interesting findings. I can't share those with you.
No, that's okay. It's got to go to the examiners.
It does. There's been some interesting findings, and it does connect into the work that I do. One of it's a personal passion. I find the whole area of positive emotions and understanding how those positive emotions, how you can activate them at work, because you can. There's things that you can do to activate those emotions. And what does that then mean in terms of how you show up, how you make decisions? And part of it is a consciousness. I often say to leaders, our emotions are fleeting and we don't necessarily notice those emotions, and we don't notice the emotion, that what triggers the change of that emotion. We might go, oh, I'm feeling something, but we don't consciously go, I've just been triggered. As a result, I now feel this. Therefore, am I now in the best emotional state to be talking to my team member, talking to a client, making a decision about an investment? Because we love to think that we're logical, rational human beings.
It's so not.
No, exactly. And I had someone the other day who said to me, oh, I've been reading this book, and in this book, they tell you how you need to just divorce emotions to be able to make decisions. And I said, oh, well, and I was, you kind of go, I need to be able to tell you, actually, from a neuroscience perspective, that's actually impossible. You can't do that. And that's what I always find interesting. I think and you would find this as well. There's a lot of really interesting books out there, interesting ideas, but when you pull it apart, there's no science or substance that sits underneath it. And I think that's probably core to my work. I want everything that I do to be couched in a practical element that people can take away, but it has to be evidence-based. Because I see a lot of situations where ideas are put out there and there's no evidence that sits underneath it. And it might make someone feel good, but it's feeling good isn't going to help you.
Totally. And Michelle, we will definitely have to have you back when you are Dr. Michelle Gibbings, because I would love to explore that whole topic and your thesis with the team.
Oh, yeah.
I reckon there's going to be some great insights. I just love that sort of stuff. And Yeah, we talk a lot about the neuroscience and stuff like that. So we very aligned in terms of making sure that the evidence is there, so that helps people be the best versions of themselves at work, as leaders, etc. Love it.
And
So,
I'd also add to that, if you
yeah,
don't mind me saying, is
of
that
course.
there's this sense of emotions are who we are. It is what gives us that sense of, that dynamic interaction, that the color, the flavor of humans, which is just so beautiful. And it's accepting all of the emotions.
Yes.
Because there's this sense, they talk about, tragic optimism and, that faux optimism, and you've got to be happy all the time and be up, even actually you feel like crap. You have to be able to create a work environment where if someone's actually feeling sad, not feeling okay about things, that there's a way that they can express that,
Yes.
and that they can then feel safe and held by the team, or held, metaphorically, not necessarily physically, by their leader, to actually go, well, what do you need from me? Because sometimes if someone's having a really crappy day, all they need to do is know that that person in front of them has heard that they're not feeling okay. You don't need to solve it for them.
Yes. Yeah, I love that share, Michelle. I'm a hugger, so they would sometimes get a hug from me. I always ask, but if people like hugs, they'll come to me. I used to be the hugging CFO, believe it or not.
That's right. Look, I'm the same. I love hugs, but I do think in this sort of day and age that we live in, you're right. You've got to be
Have to ask.
very careful.
Yes.
Like I go back to a corporate environment that I worked in many years ago, and quite often, you'd see people give them a hug and a kiss, and I think, particularly also because of COVID, people have
Yes.
now
Yep.
shied away from some of
Yep.
that, because like, well, am I?
Yeah. Yep. I was running a planning day this week for a client, and first time meeting most of them, and a number of them came in and hugged, and I went, oh, this is a really interesting, because you very rarely see that in a corporate sort of environment. So I was like, they obviously get on well, and it was very apparent over the day that they did. So yeah, love it. All right. What else am I going to ask you? Let's start on the next one that I was going to ask you, and then we'll riff off it. I had a conversation with one of my neighbours on the weekend, and they took over a team, and that team had a number of very entitled employees, and to the point where the managers were all going, you've got not a great job looking after all of these people. However we can support you, we will, but we know that you're sort of facing an uphill battle. So I noticed that you've got a 6-step guide around how do you manage this entitled employees. So I reckon there's a number of viewers and listeners that would probably love to hear some ideas. So over to you, Michelle.
Oh, beautiful. Are you happy for me just to go through all 6?
Absolutely.
Look, the first thing is actually, let's understand what entitlement is.
Yes,
because
good.
there's a concept called psychological entitlement, which you can research and you can do self-assessments on. But in a work context, it can take on a number of forms. One of them is, if someone expects more pay than their peers, even if they're doing less, they expect to always be the one who gets promoted, offered the best opportunities. They expect that they should be able to pick and choose what it is that they want to do. They expect that the company should be able to just manage their career for them, or they should be able to take breaks kind of whenever it suits them. So if you kind of were to sum that up, it's that sense of me, 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 me. It's all about me.
Yeah.
And they don't consider the impact that their behavior has on people around them. What the research shows is when you have an entitled employee, that really impacts your team. And so it's really important, firstly, clarify expectations, because what can be happening is that there's a gap in expectations, and there's a number of elements to it. You need to understand actually what are their expectations. You need to go into that conversation as well, very clear on what your expectations are, so that you can explore the gap between the two. So, for example, if they're expecting a pay rise, what you want to be able to do is talk to them about what they would need to demonstrate to be able to secure that pay rise, and then understand from them, well, actually, where do they think they are? And then get really explicit. Well, okay, if that's where you think you are, here's the gaps that I'm seeing. And here are some of the things that I would want to be able to see for you to close those gaps, for me to be able to go that, yes, you're ready for a pay rise.
Yep.
That also means you don't just walk into that conversation unprepared. You want to get prepared for it. You want to think about the context of the operating environment. You want to be able to think about, as I was saying, the expectation of what that gap might look like. You also want to be able to understand your team members' motivation, their career drivers, and then be able to go into that conversation with an open mind and hear their perspective. So you might be assuming they're entitled, but perhaps there's something else that's going on. Perhaps you're missing something. And what you want to be able to do ideally is walk away from the conversation so that both of you have an understanding of each other's perspective. You've got aligned expectations and therefore a clear way of moving forward on this. And that means one of the key parts is you need to monitor progress. Often what happens is, leaders will have a conversation, there's some sense of agreement. You really do need to make sure there's clarity on that agreement and the next steps, but then nothing else happens. And so you have to be able to monitor the progress. Notice where you're seeing improvement. Notice where you're not seeing improvement and give feedback. So, and it's that timely feedback so that they can go, okay, I can see how that relates to this. Then if they refuse to change, you need to consider the impact on the rest of the team.
Yes.
And therefore what your other options are. Because is it that you then want to go down some sort of formal performance improvement path? And then the two other kind of key bits that sit around all of this is be consistent and fair. Because if you're having a conversation with someone about being entitled, is there someone in your team who's the favorite, the protected species, who you are letting get away with things that you're not letting other people get away with? So be really clear that you are being fair when you're having this conversation with someone and being consistent.
Yes.
And above all else, focus on teamwork. Because what you want to be able to do is help that person understand the impact that their behavior is having on the rest of the team. And also for you to be able to really clearly articulate, this is where I really value your contribution in the team. This is how you're a really important part of the team. I really want you to continue to contribute and be a part of a team. But behavior matters. And these are the standards. So for you to continue to be in the team, these are the things that I need to see. And if I'm not seeing that, then we're going to need to have a conversation around what those next steps might be.
Love that. So I loved that you talked about teamwork there. And I'd really love to get your understanding of what's the difference between good teamwork and what will we see if it's not so good?
I always think you can sense it. You can walk into a room and go, yeah, there's something that's missing. So it's not just the vibe, as they would say in the castle, but there is a sense of that and there's a balance, because there's something which is really nice about a team that's collegiate and there's banter and there's fun. But when a team is too collegiate, too friendly, then there's no challenge. And so you need that balance between we're going to be collegiate, but we're going to challenge. We need very clear responsibilities around who does what, because often where I see tension points in teams, it's not clear who's got accountability for what, and that diffusion creates tension. The team member, the team leader needs to be very clear and get agreement from the team around how the team works together. So there's clear standards and people are held to those standards. And the leader needs to not play favorites, because the person who is in the out group, they know they are not in the out group. Also, they know they're in the out group.
You don't even feel it.
Yeah, you don't even need to tell them. They know when there's an in group and there's an out group. So, and I think sometimes leaders think that people don't notice. And I was saying this the other day to someone, I said, you think you can push it under the carpet, but there's a lump and everyone sees that lump. Everyone sees you walking over that lump, and they know that that lump is there, and that lump impacts your reputation. So I think teams can mean slightly different things to different people, and different people need different things from a team environment as well. And that's why I always say there's never a cookie cutter approach. What it is for you as a leader, and recognize that your team is different every time one person leaves or joins. Your team is different. So this is not a set and forget. This is every time the team comes together with someone new or someone leaves, you're reforming, you're re-agreeing about how you work together. That's so important. And often leaders don't do that. They go, oh, well, I did a team day last year and we've done our team agreements and they've been sent around to everybody. Yeah, but what about the two newbies who turned up last month? Oh, yeah, we sent them to them. We sent them an email.
Ouch.
Or they've had a buddy and the buddy's taken them through, but there's no buy-in.
Yes.
There's no
Yep.
conversation. And I always remember the best leader I ever had was early in my career. And she said to me, yeah, Michelle, I get you're ambitious and you want to do well and all that kind of stuff. But she said, your job is to really help people get to where they can't get to, but for the fact that they're working for you.
No.
And you have to balance the task and
Yep.
the people. And she goes, your focus at the moment is too much on the task. And you then by default do a bit on the people. And she said, this is not to say that you're not a nice person, but she said, you have to focus more on the people, because when you focus first on the people, that task bit will happen. They will do the work and do the work better because they feel connected and engaged and part of something that matters. Christine Porath, who's an academic at Georgetown University, talks about how the number one thing that employees need is respect.
Yes.
And if you create an environment where your team is respected, the individuals in that team are respected, they will work and deliver more and deliver higher quality work as well.
So now I'm curious, when you were given that advice about the task versus the people, what are some of the lessons that you've learned since you got given that advice and have applied and found work really well?
That she was really smart, and I was really glad that she was my boss.
I love that.
No, look, I really do. I look back and I think I was so fortunate to work for her early in my career, because she was formative in really helping me understand what type of leader I wanted to be. I had in my own little brain, it's almost like these myths of what it meant to be a leader.
Yep.
And I realized a lot of those myths were dated, irrelevant,
Yep.
not helpful. I think the thing that I have learned, and I see it all the time, and I say this to all my clients, leadership is contextual.
Yep.
You need to understand the context in which you are working. And that doesn't mean you come into a new environment and you throw everything out, but don't assume that because a particular tactic or technique or something worked in one environment, that you can just pick it up and drop it into a new environment. That's not how it works.
Yes.
And you're not building a relationship with a team. You are building relationships with individuals. And as you build those individual relationships, that then helps to form the team. And often I see people trying to manage collectively, and there's an element of that, but actually it's individual, because different people need different things from you. And taking the time to know that. The other key piece of advice I got, and this is when I was working with an executive coach, and she said to me at one point, she goes, Michelle, you're impenetrable. I said, what do you mean by that? And she said, your team like you, they respect you, but they don't know you. And I said, I still don't understand what you mean. And she goes, you're too perfect. You turn up, the hair is perfect. You're never flustered. You're never late. Everything is always done. And I said, and the problem with that would be? And she goes, they can't get to see the real you.
Yeah.
You need to share more of who you are.
Nice.
And so I realized that I needed to, still be professional, but it was almost drop that sense of here's professional Michelle, here's personal Michelle, and do a bit more blending so that people could see the real me and understand me. And I think what I find now when people meet me for the first time, because often they've seen me online or they've watched a video or they've heard someone talk about me. And when people meet me, they go, oh my God, you are exactly like you are when I've seen you on the video or on a TV. And I think, yeah, of course.
Nice.
And that to me is lovely, because it's saying I am in the skin I need to be in. I'm not trying to be someone that I'm not. And that takes effort. That has taken work. And I found probably, I talk about identity with people and really understanding your identity and recognizing that identity shifts. And for me, there was a really big identity shift when I left corporate to do what I'm doing now. And in particular, in the first couple of years. And when I wrote my first book, I just felt like, who the hell is this woman? And I remember when I sent the manuscript off to the publisher, and she rang me and said, oh, how do you feel? It must be amazing. I said, oh my God, I feel nauseous. I am just waiting for the world to judge me. I'm waiting for all those people that I used to work with to go, oh my God, who the hell does she think she is? What? She thinks she's a writer. But then when I got to my second book, I was like, who cares?
Yeah.
But that was an evolution. It was
Yeah.
working it through and kind of going, yeah, actually,
Mm.
this is who I am. And I'm pretty cool with that.
I love that, Michelle. And I felt exactly the same when I released my first book, and I'm just writing my second one at the moment. So I'm curious because, now you've had 10 years of running your own business, and we have a number of people who run businesses who listen in on our podcast. So any insights you've had from, because 10 years is quite a long time to run your own business. What are some of the insights for those that perhaps are starting out, or maybe you're struggling a little bit at the moment?
Be careful who you listen to. There's a lot of people who have absolutely no idea what it is to run a business, but gee, they're full of advice. But there's also some people who can be incredibly helpful, and paying for expertise to help you is really important. Don't expect people to do things for free. And, that doesn't mean that people won't, but there's a reason why people charge, and sometimes there can be a big dollar attached to it. So that, I don't go equate the dollar with the value. I think you've got to do your own homework to work out who works for you. And you've also got to work out when you've outgrown something. So I've done a number of things in my early days, which were absolutely pivotal and helping me. But then I then got to a point where this isn't giving me anything else that I needed. And so I was able and very comfortable to exit. And so you've got to know when to enter and when to exit. Really important to have someone around you, and it only needs to be one person who is absolutely your cheer squad, and that's my husband. He has been amazing. Leaving corporate where I was earning bucket loads to go, hey, and I remember my first year of business, I said to Craig, ooh, I just earned what I earned the first year out of university.
Let's give Craig a big shout out.
Yeah. Oh, look, I often say to anyone who's listening, from a career perspective, one of the most important things is who you partner with.
Yes.
And that's not saying, you can, people can have a very happy life being single as well. Yeah. But if you are choosing to partner, be deliberate about that, because that choice will either accelerate your career or send it in the absolute opposite direction. And I was really clear about that. I got married later in life, and, I always said I wanted to marry someone who helped make me a better person. And he does, because he holds up the mirror. He challenges me, but challenges with love. And absolutely has my back. And you need that, because there are times when it's really hard and it can feel really lonely. And I was saying this to a good friend of mine this morning who runs her own business. And I got two pieces of advice from a guy who runs his own business when I was first starting. And he said two things, Michelle. No one is going to be interested in your business in the same way that you are. Yep. So do not expect people to show any interest or ask any questions. And that has actually turned out to be true. Even with some very good friends of mine where I'm like, wow, how can you not be interested in what I'm doing? But they're not. And that's okay. I've had to learn to be okay with that. And the second bit is, you will never get a lot of feedback. So sometimes the client feedback is they've rehired you. And the fact that they've rehired you, you know that you've done a good job. Occasionally, like yesterday, I woke up this morning to a lovely email from the CEO to go, oh my God, the team just loved the last couple of days. Yeah. And that's lovely, but you don't get that all the time, or you'll get it secondhand. Yes. And so what he was saying is, you need to find your own proof points of progress, and you need to celebrate your own milestones, because sometimes those milestones as well that are really important in the evolution of the business are some that no one else is going to know about. So you need to find ways to reward yourself. Don't get distracted by shiny new toys. There are so many technology things out there. You don't need the latest this, the latest that, the latest app, the latest whatever. So be really clear. Yes, you hire experts when you need it, but it's the same with all of the platforms and tools and technologies and this and that. Work out what works for you and don't get distracted. And it's a bit like with, I love being on podcasts. I cannot tell you the number of times people say to me, oh, Michelle, I can't believe you don't have your own podcast show. And I said, I have zero interest in running a podcast show. Yep. I do little videos every week that I share. I love, so thank you for having me. Absolutely love being on other people's podcasts. I just love it. It's great. Yep. I don't want to do my own. And so that's just, be clear. Yeah. Where do you want to play? And therefore, what do you want to say no to? And don't be distracted that because everyone else has got this, that you have to have it too. Run your own race.
Love that advice. And big shout out to Jez, who is our podcast host and also our fabulous producer and editor. So that's why we do podcasts, Michelle, because we've got the great Jez on our team. So we're just about at the end of our conversation, which I'm loving. Curious, anything else you'd like to share?
Life's an adventure. I look at my career, and if someone had said to me when I was 18, or even when I was finishing university, Michelle, this is what you were going to do, I would never have been able to map it out. Even a year before I left corporate, if someone had said to me, oh, Michelle, you're going to run your own business, I would have gone, I'm a corporate chick. I know how that, I kind of know the corporate world.
Yeah.
Be open to the opportunity. And I think part of it is a risk thing. So I have a high appetite for risk, but I also have a very risk adverse financial management strategy in the background.
Yep.
And so, when I wrote my second book, and excuse the language, you've been allowed to swear on your show, but I have this whole section in the book around career lead, which is called Fuck You Money. And I said, this is not about being a millionaire.
I love it. Yep.
But I see a lot of people who earn quite good money. And, obviously there are people who this does not apply to because they're really struggling. And I absolutely get that. But there's a rump where they earn good money, but they spend to their limit. And so therefore, when they lose their job, they are stuffed.
Yeah.
I've always lived under my means, not to my means. And so that meant when I left corporate, there was a buffer. Because when I left corporate, I had people said to me, how can you afford to do this? And I said, because I'm a saver, not a spender.
Yes.
And everything that I've done has been about, I don't want to be overly burdened by the handcuffs of the wage slave, where you've built this lifestyle that you cannot afford to ever leave, because that also from a negotiation point of view puts you in a very difficult position. And I've had situations back in my corporate days where I've negotiated really hard on things, and even put my job on the line, and people have said to me, oh my God, I can't believe you did that. And I said, well, two things. One, if I left tomorrow, I would be okay because I know I'm good at my job and I'd find something else. And I'm not saying that to be arrogant.
No.
But I had skills that I knew were marketable. And two, I've got savings. So even if it took me X months to find something, I've got a buffer. And what I found was having that buffer gave me confidence.
Yeah.
So when I was in situations where people were trying to back me into a corner, I came out, first mover advantage, first rule of negotiation. And I cannot tell you, anyone's ever in the corner like that, come and have a chat to me. I am very good at when you are back to the wall and someone is trying to minimize you at work.
Yes.
I know how to navigate and come out the other side in a better position. And usually it's because first mover advantage, and they have absolutely underestimated me. And I'm nothing better than being underestimated.
How good is that?
Oh, yeah. Because then when it happens and HR says to you, oh, my God, they didn't think you'd do that. I go, yeah, well, isn't that on them?
Oh, I love it, Michelle. Oh, it's been such a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, I'm sure that our listeners and our viewers would love to reach out to you. So where is the best places for them to find you? And tell us a little bit about your books too.
Oh, thank you. And I've loved it as well. It's such a nice conversation. You've got a lovely style.
Thank you.
Look, the best thing, please connect on LinkedIn. So Michelle Gibbings is an easy place to find me, and also same for my website. So if you go to Michelle Gibbings, I share insights every week. And there's 3 books. So the first one was Step Up, which is all about how to influence. The second book, Career Leap, was about how to reinvent, liberate your career. And the third book was called Bad Boss, what to do if you work for one, you manage one, or you are one. And I've had people say to me, oh, that sounds really negative. I said, no, it's actually it's a very inspirational, it's a book of hope, because it's very based on the premise that we all own our part. And so if an environment's not working, what is it that you can do to shift? Now, that doesn't mean if you've got a bad boss who's a narcissist, you can change them, but there are some strategies that you can deploy to help navigate that situation. And then you make some very deliberate choices about what it is that you do next. So that's me.
Awesome. So we will put those links in the podcast descriptions and in the YouTube video descriptions as well. Thank you so much, Michelle, for joining us. And for all of our listeners and viewers, we wish you a magical week.